Okay, so you're trying to figure out a way to get your bass to sound louder in your mix without eating up so much headroom. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you a technique that I like to use to get more perceived loudness out of the bass sound. Check this out. Okay, so right now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a before and after. Check this out, without the technique first, and then I'll explain it. So with that particular technique, I just want you to know the difference between those two is about a dB as far as headroom is concerned. But in that particular example, I know that you're probably hearing it more on your phone speaker when I'm popping the technique on and off, giving you more of the perceived loudness of the bass without eating up a ton of headroom. And that's super important, because if you have a lot of that bass and you take it and you turn it up, what's going to happen is it's going to make your limiters work harder, and thus it kind of hurts your ability to get your song louder. So how are we getting more perceived loudness out of the bass without eating up so much headroom? So what I have set up right here is a Fab Filter Saturn. Why, how, what is the philosophy behind approaching this whole thing? So for me, I look at my bass in two sections. I say one section of the bass is the felt part of the bass, and then the other section is the heard part of the bass. What's the difference? To me, the heard part of the bass is that mid-range of the bass. That's the part of the bass that I'm hearing predominantly on the cell phone. That heard stuff, that gritty, mid-range, kind of intelligible kind of stuff in there that feels, quote unquote, a little bit brighter. That stuff, the mid-range of the bass and above. Then we have the felt, which is all that juice, that low-end warmth, quote unquote, that we love and adore, sub, all that kind of information. When I'm looking at those two ranges, one is easily picked up on by our ear and the other is more felt. If I wanted to hear more of the sub information, I'm going to have to turn up that sub information a lot more to hear it than I would perhaps the mid-range to feel that difference. When I'm taking the sub and I'm turning it up as far as the low end energy, I'm eating up a lot of headroom in order to get more of that stuff heard, especially on a cell phone. If I said to myself, oh, I don't hear enough of that bottom end on my bass, and you turn that bass up, you may say to yourself, oh, I hear it. But then you look at your meter and notice, oh my gosh, I lost like 7 dB of headroom. So what I've started doing was I started to separate my bass into two pieces. One is the heard, one is the felt. Do I want to hear more of the bass, or do I want to feel more of the bass? And with this methodology, it's helped me to kind of understand or to know how to approach my bass when it comes to what I'm actually looking for. Okay, so here I've separated my bass into two sections like I told you. One is the heard part of the bass and one is the felt. Now, how am I figuring that out? I'm gonna zero this out, and I exaggerated the effect just for the purpose of the tutorial. I'm gonna zero this out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out. I'm going to take all the stuff that I had on off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to sweep until I feel like I'm losing or taking out all of the low end of the bass, and I have more or less just that mid gritty heard part of the bass, and that's it. So I'm looking to ignore all the low end of the bass, and I'm going to sweep until I feel like, oh, no more low end, just mid-range kind of stuff. All right. So let's take this, let's solo it. Okay, right in this range, which was between about 350 hertz and about 2000 hertz, was where I felt like, look at all of that intelligence and all that mid-range girth and grit of the bass. So now I've identified all of the stuff that ignores the low end. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and add some saturation. I'm going to use the transformer setting, and I'm going to hit gentle transformer. Let's listen to what that saturation sounds like. I'm going to crank it up as I go. So from a harmonic standpoint, I get a little bit more bite out of it, just a little bit of grit, and I enjoy it. It feels really nice. I'm gonna back off just a little bit. I just exaggerated just to show you what it sounded like. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the entire range from a multi-band standpoint, if that makes sense to you. We're looking at this, and I'm going to boost the entire range just a little bit. So watch this. So basically what I boosted was a bunch of this. That section right there to me is that heard part of the bass. That's the part of the bass that I know for sure I'm going to probably be hearing a lot of in smaller speakers. Now, granted, if I can hear the smaller speakers, I'm also going to hear it on these nice monitors that I have here as well. So this allows me to get more perceived loudness out of the bass without eating up a ton of headroom. So now that I've done that, I can even take it a step further. I can now go to this dynamic section as well, and I can squeeze a little bit more dynamics with this particular range. Check this out. So just squeeze a little bit more dynamics out of, or just squeeze dynamics when it came to this particular range, and it just kind of gave me a little bit more of a louder sound within it. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bypass this back and forth. Check this out without first. So you can hear that difference when I bypass it back and forth. That heard part of the bass, or the perceived loudness, or the mid-range part of the bass, just gets a lot more present, and it's not eating up a ton of headroom. Now, granted, if you're worried about that 1 dB difference that I'm getting from the before and after, which it is, it's about a 1 dB difference between the two. What I can also do is I can turn on my Fab Filter Saturn, but then I can also apply a little bit of soft clipping to just control that peak. If you're a stickler for that type of stuff and just want to control that 1 dB of headroom that you lost. But for me, I'm fine with it, because that sound overall sounds way more than a dB for me, as far as that perceived volume that I'm getting versus what I'm actually seeing from a peak standpoint on my meter. So I'm getting more out of the bass. I've decided and broke up the philosophy of the bass into heard versus felt, and now it allows me to properly kind of attack the problem that I'm trying to solve. If I felt like I didn't have enough of the felt part, I was like, I'm not really feeling the bass like that, then I would go towards the low end and try to inflate that and do some processing there. If I felt like I really can't hear this thing, then I'm floating more towards that mid-range of the bass to bring that out more in order to get that perceived volume, because I don't want to eat up a bunch of headroom, because I'm just trying to hear the bass. So I hope that makes sense. Please comment, like, and subscribe. If you have any questions, please let me know. And yeah, become a member of the channel. It would help so much in keeping things going and supporting us. And also you can visit helpmedevvon.com at any time to get some of our goodies, plugins, presets, the whole nine. Again, thank you so much for watching. And again, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, or videos you would like to see me do next, please put that in the comment section below. I hope that made sense. And until next time, y'all.